right, everybody. Welcome to the second talk of Mission Creek Alt. Alt this year, as some of you who were here earlier already heard, has changed a little bit from previous years. So we're really trying to focus on the intersection between technology and other parts of our lives. So the talk now, this panel, is about the intersection of technology and education and how education is changing curriculum and perhaps some of vice versa. So we have some great panelists from a number of local different ed tech related things. So I'm just gonna basically say who they are and where they work and kind of leave it at that and give them an opportunity to talk a little bit more about how they got into this, what they're excited about, what they do. Without further ado, we have Alec Whitters from Higher Learning Technology, Michael Eynon-Lynch from Paradeck, Dan Smith from ACT, and Adam Ingersoll from Compass. And then our moderator for today is Shawn Cornally from Iowa Big, and I'll let them kind of get into more of the details. So thank you.
Thanks, Wes. Hi, my name's Shawn. I'm just going to ask some questions and hopefully get a conversation going here today. I work at Iowa Big, which is a wall-less and courseless high school in Cedar Rapids. If you want to know more about that, iowabig.org. It's probably the last we'll talk about that here. I want to throw you guys sort of the basic first question. Like Wes said, this is the Venn diagram of technology and education, and all of you represent that. You live squarely in that overlap, and I just wonder if you would just take a few minutes and tell us what's your company's thrust in that overlap. Why are you living there? Why are you doing that for a living or for value? Where are you guys at with that? And Alec, if you'd start, please.
Yep. Can you guys hear me through that? Great. So we at Higher Learning Technologies, we got started because I found while getting trained in professional school to be a dentist that I was forced to use paper flashcards and not able to tap into the technology that I use in every other part of my life. So meaning my smartphone and just being able to have those same tools that are engaging, through Facebook and other things. It was amazing to me that I couldn't use those same things for education. And so what we did, we made it so that way students would be able to study on their smartphones where they're natively living, so that way they could be able to tap into that tool. And we're really building it out for professionals across all verticals. So we're helping nurses, doctors, dentists, people who are getting their real estate license. So across a wide variety of professions, we're helping to train them for their career through their smartphone and putting their materials for them to study on that. And we want to be there from the very beginning of their professional education all the way through the end of their career. And so it's something we're really excited about. And our aim is really to make sure that we're delivering the right content in the right way at the right time for that person. Instead of the one size fits everyone, we want to get the right thing to the right person.
I think you might be leaving out that you're also wildly successful at it.
Yeah.
That's kind of an important point, I think. Michael, if you would, please.
Yeah. I used to be a high school teacher, and I always struggled when I was asking questions of my students, especially since I had been a shy student myself. I never knew how to call on the students who didn't want to answer, who would be mortified if I really pointed them out. So we went on to build PearDeck, which is it's a platform that lets teachers turn any presentation, so anytime where you would normally be giving a PowerPoint or a keynote, you could use PearDeck instead and turn the presentation into an interactive one. Because we knew that students had all these devices sitting in their laps, whether it was a computer issued by the school or a phone that they're just carrying around, and the teacher's having a hard time keeping them off those devices. Instead, now we encourage teachers to use PearDeck and make use of those devices so every single student can be answering the questions through their own device in a way that feels safe and comfortable to them and is anonymous. But then the teacher gets full eyes on what every student is thinking, what they understand, if the students are confused, if they're ready to move faster. So we make it easier and more engaging for a teacher to do that kind of full class direct instruction.
Hello, I'm Dan Smith. I'm with ACT. I've kind of bounced around startup land in Iowa City and ACT for the last 4 or 5 years. I think my first jump into ed tech, if you want to call it that, was with a startup here called Cluster Flunk, and trying to figure out how to connect students outside the classroom. And then I joined ACT. At first, ACT Profile was what it's called, and it was pitched as a startup within a company, and that sounded pretty interesting to me. It was ACT's attempt to try and actually reach individual students as users or customers. And then I was in another startup, College Raptor, a local startup, looking at college finance and college admissions. Recently came back to ACT doing international strategy. So I think what has attracted me to this space is because I see a lot of gaps. And I was one of ACT's missions is to help underserved learners. And first generation college students are one of those, and I was one of those. And I know all the pain points that I encountered when I was going through school and how difficult it was when you're one of those students that is not top of the class, is not focused on your academic studies. And trying to make some of the ACT assessments, which are actually quite broad, quite a range, and the mission of ACT of college and career readiness and success, make that a reality, and how do we play within the ecosystem when you have Compass, Paradeck, High Learning Technologies building awesome things, and we have a rich history and tradition of data and research. How do we play in that world? So that's what first attracted me to it.
Adam Ingersoll. I graduated high school in this area in '93, went to USC out in Los Angeles, needed a job, answered an ad in the student newspaper for SAT, ACT tutors, $15 an hour. Sounded amazing. And 23 years later, I'm still doing test prep. Wasn't a master plan, but that's what I'm doing. The company that I own now with the partner, Compass Education Group, is California's largest provider of tutoring and consulting for college admission tests, such as the ACT. To give you a sense of it, we employ about 500 instructors, work with thousands of students a year, about 50,000 hours of tutoring, mostly in students' homes. Last year, 49,000 of those hours were live in-person one-on-one. 1,000 hours were online, but that's obviously growing, and that's the future. And some of the challenges that we face and the things that interest us, we primarily work with very affluent families who are spending thousands of dollars to have a tutor come to their home and pump up their ACT or SAT score. So for us, the way to reach more students at more of a range of price points involves technology, distributed learning, getting away from a one-to-one model to a one-to-many, and these are some of the things that we're working on. If it were the ACT test right now, that person would be thrown out, but here it's fine. There we go.
Cool, thanks. So I wanted to take a quick poll. We're kind of a small group here today, which is awesome. Who is involved in higher ed in some way? Student, professor, whoever. Are there any teachers in the room? K-12? Awesome. Is anyone in ed tech, has a startup, has an idea for a startup, messing around with coding and awesome.
Just raise your hand for all of them.
Yeah, no, that's great, fantastic. That's what I love about being in Iowa City, is that everyone has an entire closet full of hats, and it's really fantastic to be here. Any other areas you guys want to pull the audience for that I'm forgetting?
I know there's a couple other ACTers in the audience, but I won't out them unless they want to out themselves.
Yeah, there's NDAs we'll sign at the end. So I wanted to, that's a joke, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you guys another question, and so I don't want to ask this in a negative way, but I want to say, instead of just getting done or just getting to graduated faster, right, which is often what teachers and students think of when they think of ed tech. Well, I can move at my own pace, I can rocket through a course, I can be done at my own whatever. Instead of that being the goal, what do you guys see as a more philosophical or pretty or less sort of get done with it and be out philosophy for ed tech? And how does that intersect with what you're working with now? How do you see that in the next couple of years?
I think that's a great question. In terms of how I see that playing out. I mean, there's so much more information in today's world. You think about for all the professionals out there and the careers people are really getting trained for, there's new information flowing through at a rate that like it's never been before. And I saw that challenge while in dental school because they have the same amount of time and there's so much more stuff that people have to learn because there's more and more research that comes out each year. And how do you jam that into the smaller spaces? And I don't think that's the right approach to make it just jammed in. It's got to really be a commitment to lifelong learning. And, you know, the people who are going to be successful in today's world are going to be focused on that journey. And that's what we want to do. We want to make it so that way we have applications and materials that allow people to study throughout their career and to stay up on those skills that they need and to be building and improving new ones. And I think probably everyone here can recognize that, you know, there's materials out there that can help us do better at what we care about. And to have access to those and to have those, you know, in your pocket at all times, we believe is hugely powerful. And I think it's something that the mindset needs to shift from you learn while you're in college to, okay, that's a time when you're focused on learning, but it's just the beginning, it's not the end.
I think for me and for what we're trying to do at Paradeck, what's interesting to me is the interaction between how technology can aid in communication and in building community. So I think when we go back to the time before we had computers on every desk and a teacher was standing at the front of the room really disseminating information, and there wasn't, it's very difficult as a teacher when you have 30 students or in a college lecture more, and you're trying to, how do you connect with every single student? There just isn't the time for that. You don't have, there's no way. You just have to you do this one size fits all. But now with computers everywhere, how can I now, instead of just using that to say now this student can move at their own pace and get done faster, I now have the ability as a teacher to have eyes on every student and know when that student needs a touch point, know how to, like what kind of information they're passionate about or what kinds of things they're struggling with. So I have this ability to connect with them. And not only that, I can put, now I'm getting into specifically what Paradeck does, but with Paradeck, I can put all of these answers, all these thoughts the students are having anonymously up on the board. So I can then use, again, technology to create this community and say, look at what all your peers are thinking and doing, instead of it being this like individual thing doing your individual worksheet. So that's what I think is.
I know I'm the moderator, so I shouldn't like comment, but that's a really beautiful picture that you're painting, both of you already. Like honoring the social nature of humans and our genetics in that, like, yeah, as a high school teacher, that's the difference between a classroom that sings and a classroom that I just can't wait for the bell to ring. So awesome. The question is, how do we get past this idea of just accelerating or being done faster? What's a brighter future for ed tech?
I think for, we're looking at where ACT is kind of positioned currently and how we kind of approach these, we have a holistic framework for what we call college and career readiness benchmarks. And this really goes well beyond the ACT, which obviously is what we're known for. And I'll use an example of something that one of the domain spaces is, in some circles it's called character, in more academic circles it's called academic perseverance. And trying to give some of this holistic framework to what it means to be ready and what it means to be prepared. I think time to completion, and I'll have more to say on this I think later if the question comes up, but that's okay for some people. That's what they want. That's the problem that they want to have solved. And finding the right pathway for them is perfectly legitimate. But for others, and I'm going to pick up on what Alec had mentioned, it is going to be, education's now become a lifelong pursuit. And I think that's where we're going to see more and more employers almost expecting to see. What does that look like then when you go from the K-12 space or K-8, then you go to high school, then you talk about college, and what does college mean if you want to be a data scientist? And our traditional companies and traditional education companies in the higher ed circle, in the higher ed space, prepared to say maybe a 4-year isn't the best path for you. Maybe there's an alternative to that. That's part of the time to completion factor. So I think a whole ecosystem approach to this and looking at what happens when you start presenting effective solutions, device agnostic, people can access any time at their own pace. I think is where you're going to see a lot of transformation. In ACT, I think where we look at is when you have more and more products coming to market, more opportunities out there, our approach is what works. From assessment design, assessment delivery, what works for the person who's taking the assessment. It could be for themselves or as part of potential employment or education. So,
I'm unconvinced. I'm hopeful but unconvinced that ed tech is ever going to fulfill its promise as the socioeconomic, leveling of the playing field, or that we'll have this education in the future will be this constant learning kind of utopia where it's all social and egalitarian and fun and, hopefully. But I think we're in a world where assessment is going to be increasingly more important, not less. Assessment's what I do. It's what ACT does in some ways. I think as the world flattens, as the competition for white-collar jobs becomes more and more intense, tests that peg your competency level and knowledge level will become higher stakes and more constant. So I agree with the thesis that lifelong learning, constant learning will be essential. I'm just not sure how that will look, how it will play out in society. I think the days are already numbered and almost over where, you take the GRE or the LSAT, you get into the graduate school, you get through it, you pass the bar, and then you go off and practice or, have in the same career for decades. That ship has sailed or will be sailing. You're increasingly going to have to be constantly learning, constantly being assessed to prove, what you know. And some people argue that assessment, standardized tests, make things more fair. I can tell you that access to it, what it takes to prepare and succeed on those tests is not level at all. So it's a very, very mixed bag.
So,
I kind of want to ask him a
Oh,
question
sorry.
after that. So, okay, because I feel like one of the challenges with it is it only takes into account certain types of skills. So there's a lot of skills that are difficult to test, and everyone is a unique individual. It can make some people feel very dumb when maybe they're not dumb. They're good socially, or could be a really great salesperson. And how do you identify some of those things through the test? And can the test become specialized enough to because what you're basically saying is diagnosing someone's skills, and that's why those are important. And can it get to the level deeper where it's it can test a wider variety of skills than the ones that have traditionally been?
Right now, the tests are still a lot more dumb than we wish they would be, and I think ACT would agree. If you're an entity like the ACT, you're always trying to improve the accuracy and relevancy of the instruments and the scores that are attached to them, and there is a huge open horizon for that to get much better. I think what you're saying is right now a standardized test that is multiple choice, you're on the clock, that format, what it can then say about you is somewhat constrained. And I'm really interested in the ability for technology to make the assessments much more meaningful and much more accessible to different types of learners. One way you might see that is the ability for, imagine taking a test where you're presented with a case study or a challenge, and your strength is to describe verbally how you would approach that problem and how you would solve it. And imagine if the assessment of your skill in doing so could be automated. Machines could listen to what you said or what you wrote down as a narrative and rate the quality of it and rate your readiness to now move into an education program or into a work position. Things like that I think we're still a long way from are really intriguing.
One of the things that what both Adam and Alec have sort of touched on is a lot of assessments we deliver tend to be or are summative. Even though if we don't want them to be summative, like we want to get away from maybe a single point in time, see a single data point. Adam's talking about this almost inadequacy, I think, of some of our assessments, even though we're always constantly trying to improve them. because there is this continuum that's developing and the ubiquity of technology to put that in front of people, for better or for worse. I think what we see is, we built this data point, but it's almost, it's not enough oftentimes. There's more to it. So, okay, you've told me I have this score on this particular skill. I'll come back to, for example, say academic perseverance or grit. You gave me this number, but now what? Now how do I improve it? And there's people out there talking about this and looking at this. So how do we, for our questions we try to look at is how do we make this sort of assessment maybe a little less stressful oftentimes, and more of an opportunity to sort of benchmark where you're at and how do you grow from that point forward. And I think that's where we, in my mind at least, start looking at where are our partners at in this? Who is playing in this ecosystem? So, yeah, I think it's really interesting sort of position to be in.
If I could interrupt real quick before we move on, I've read some interesting research and seen some really cool sort of co-authors of people who work at ACT who are in what I would call like sort of deep research in this area into machine learning and using machine learning to do what Adam was just describing, actually listening to a human and making a reasonable assessment of what they might be saying. And I wonder if, I don't know, maybe that's proprietary stuff you can't talk about, but down that road, that seems to me this sort of like ed techy science fiction vibe. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say about that.
No, I can say machine learning is very much top of mind for ACT. There's somebody in the audience who could speak to it in more depth than I can, but I won't single that person out. But yeah, machine learning for those types of purposes. But again, we want to make sure we ask ourselves to what end, to what purpose, and who's it really going to benefit at the end of the day. There's a number of business cases I can, from a business perspective, I can think of operationally, but the operational efficiency won't really matter if it isn't delivering value to somebody at the end of the day. So it's exciting, but we have to be careful.
I agree. That's something we get asked to do, to consider a lot at Paradeck. Like you've given this presentation, you've asked students these questions, you have all their answers, and like now can you prescribe for the teacher the now what? Can you tell them like what activity these students should do as opposed to these students? And it's something that we're very cautious about because there's, I think for me at this point, and maybe with machine learning I will be convinced differently, but for me that is the role of the teacher, is to be, you can give the teacher all this information and this data and then you leave it to the professional teacher to decide what needs to happen or what these students need. And teachers are playing more and more this role of kind of guide and facilitator as opposed to just disseminator of knowledge. And I get nervous about a situation where I think I can build that the computer will be smarter and more sensitive to what a student needs in a given moment than another human being. So we take that very seriously, and we want to give teachers as much information as we can and make recommendations for them without trying to be the teacher, as I don't think we're at that point. I hope we're not at that point.
And to touch on that thought, so I was down at South by Southwest, and an overriding theme I saw, and the main message that I took out from that was what the world is moving more towards. I characterize it in my mind as like the automatic motion sensing door. It's like, okay, you're walking up to the door, it knows you want the door to open, and it has that data point to capture it because you're standing there. And we're starting to collect with technology so many more data points coming in. You can understand so much more about that person that then it can help put the next thing in front of you, or it knows what action you're likely to do next. And I think that's hugely powerful, and that's something that we need to be leveraging those data points. You know, for us, we have about 600,000 practice questions a day answered, and so we have a really strong understanding of where these students sit. We have 40% of all nursing students using our app, so we can know, hey, here's where they're at, here's what they need to do. But I also very strongly agree with what you said. People often ask me, like, are we trying to replace the classroom or something like that? And no, absolutely not. I think it's one component of the process to have this thing in your pocket that you're able to learn from, and the different ways that you can be learning. But in the end, it has to be a teacher-driven process, I believe, and that communication in the group is something that's just very human, and it can't purely come from a machine, but I think it can be a very important piece. And I also believe that it can help the teacher in efficiently making those decisions because, as you said, it's kind of overwhelming. You don't know where everyone sits at, and so I think it can help facilitate, but it can't do it.
I think another piece to all, so like there's certain hard facts, you know, that are part of learning, but another part of learning, especially in this day and age, we talk a lot about 21st century skills and the ability to communicate and think critically and to be creative and think outside the box and, you know, tackle big problems and figure out how to solve them given the information you have and don't yet have but need to figure out that you don't have. And I don't think, like, if we move learning completely to this automated system where the machine can know that, like, now the student's ready for this kind of fact or this kind of information, I think we limit severely the ability for students to gain all of these other 21st century social skills that we now know are so important. And, you know, are things that employers are like, that's the missing piece. When I go to hire someone, like, I'm hiring all these students, they don't have any ability to communicate.
So I want to ask you, if your company, I want to ask this question two ways. If your company were to suddenly raise a huge round, right, $20 million or whatever's big to your organization, what would you grow? What would you build? Or a better way to ask that question is, like, what's the golden goose for you? Like, it's not replacing the teachers with a computer, then what is it?
What is a lot of money to you? Is it to you?
A 20 million tech budget would be nice. Yeah. It'd be 20 times bigger than, great. For us, the big challenge, and as I'm listening to a second ago, I think the hard part is if you're trying to teach somebody something that's highly technical and fact-driven, then ed tech's promise is already fulfilled. You know, all the information is available. Most of it's free or inexpensive. But so much of education is you know, like why hasn't test prep, what we do, been completely replaced by online programs that are asynchronous, just presenting information? You know, or if I could ask this way, any of you, if you think back to your best educational experiences you've ever had, your best teachers, you know, when you were learning the most, you had somebody, a human, who was observing you, interacting with you, engaging you, asking you questions, helping you assemble and interpret information, and having machines or technology that replaces that is very, very hard. A step towards it, what that would look like in my business is one of the advantages of having a tutor is as you are working, you're being observed, and as you hit stumbling blocks or take wrong turns, you have somebody helping you understand, not just telling you what you did wrong, but helping you understand what was going on in your head as you made that mistake or took that wrong turn. Having technology that simply observes the learner in action and takes in what they're doing. So for me, it'd be how much time they're spending on a question, where they're distracted by extraneous information, where they're delayed, because for a lot of students, I challenge any of you, if you go take the ACT Science, you're going to feel a little bit rush. You know, so where's the student not using time efficiently? And a big step would be technology that helps the teacher do an even better job of observing the student and taking in feedback that would then, you know, and then the challenge in the classroom, for example, is you know, if you got 30 kids, how to use technology to facilitate individual attention and to make the individual attention each student can receive much, much more valuable. And I think certainly things that PearDeck, HLT are doing are in that direction. Well, I was very happy to be an early investor in your brainchilds. Yeah.
Quite honest, I'm not exactly sure what I would do if $20 million fell into my lap at ACT. There's a number of things from a technology perspective, but also, I mean, part of me would like to just hire a core of people or hire another team to manage all the day-to-day operational stuff just so we could spend more time actually going to classrooms and actually talking to teachers and observing them and talking to the parents. For us, it's just hard when the flagship is pushing you in one direction to really explore deeply other ones. I think one of the things I would like to do is, again, thinking about how we can most effectively play a role in developing educational ecosystem. Being device agnostic, platform agnostic would be exploring, I think, for us, how do we make our data live and be useful? And we may not know all those use cases. So I think I would, off the top of my brain, I would probably look at how do we create a layered API layer so other people can tap into our data and our research to make the best products for their audiences and do what we do best and try to provide that value. That's something I've thought about and would love to explore more. So if I had $20 million, I could certainly explore for a while.
If you need someone to beta test with that, with a free API,
Duly noted.
My school would do that.
Yeah, I now know what we would do. We would hire more developers to make use of ACT's API.
Awesome. Sorry, did I cut you off?
Oh, I want to touch on that question.
Yeah,
yeah.
go nuts.
Okay, I didn't know if you're moving to another question. I like that question.
I was surprised you didn't take it after.
So with $20 million raised, what I want to do, so we have a pretty good formula figured out. We know how to get content. We know how to put it in a platform that people like and make apps out of it to train professionals. And we know how to get it in front of students and market it to them. And so I would want to, multiply that formula, just do it many, many more times, but then also make it much more powerful by that whole theme I was saying, the right content in the right way at the right time. So I'd want to integrate more video, more interactive components, 3D anatomy, and so expand widely with what we're doing and just build on top of what we have much more so. And with the end game being to actually lower the prices of our applications and be there from cradle to grave for their professional learning journey. So throughout their entire career, and really lower the cost on the front end and leverage the data as you were saying. So if we can understand the whole learner profile, if you think about like Facebook, it has all the demographic information, how valuable that is in serving the right content. Well, with understanding their whole learning profile and being able to take that so we can say, hey, here's a job in your area you might be interested in right now that fits these skills that we know you have and that we know you'd enjoy. Or you're really struggling in learning about EKGs. Here's a world-class EKG person from EKG tutor from your area who can help you develop that. Are you interested? So that's what we would want to build towards in professional education.
That's awesome. I wanna. Oh, sorry.
Is it cool if we ask questions?
Yeah, I should have said that. I'm the worst moderator ever. Yeah.
Clark Kent, Daily Planet. I, for one, welcome our robot overlords, but in the meantime, I haven't heard you guys talk at all about parents with ed technology. Is there anything that you're seeing in the future that's not just student to technology or teacher to technology, but also involves parents?
I can approach that a few different ways. In our business, the parent relationship's very important. They're actually our client. They're the purchaser, of the service for the student. And keeping them informed in a meaningful way, a way that gives them comfort that the process is intact and that would even give them ways to be involved meaningfully in ways that the student would tolerate. We have ideas on how to use technology to deliver that, and right now it's very low tech. A tutor records detailed notes and assessment of each session, and that's revealed to parents. But the usefulness of it has a long way to go. As a parent myself, 4 elementary age kids, I would love to see a technology layer that much more integrated me, my wife, with what our kids are doing at school. I sit down to help my 6th grade daughter do her homework, and I can help her, but I have zero understanding of the context. And with technology, why couldn't I know a ton about what her teacher and what her school, is trying to accomplish with her and how she's doing, and I could be a much more capable helper to her and be more of a partner in her academic life if technology aided that. Right now, this is an amazing public school system. We came from LA, where it's a school district with over 1 million students and a multi-billion-dollar budget and systemic problems like you would not believe. You come here and it's night and day, but it was fairly well funded, relatively speaking. But still, there's that piece that isn't even, I think, even being touched at all, yet.
I think for ACT, I think a lot of the issues are going to be somewhat similar, I think, to what Adam is referring to with Compass. And we know that a lot of the people who engage with us, even though we know a lot of parents register for their student. And so how do we have that sort of open dialogue with them and make things useful to them? And it kind of goes back to somewhat of the usability of some of the things we give out. It's not meant to be a number or just a number. It's meant to be sort of a way to sort of check on progress. And really, just like Adam had said, I get emails from a platform every day. There's a couple companies I think are doing this better than others, some that aren't. Some send me batch emails, 13 at a time, with all these updates and progress reports on my kids. Do I read them? No, I have to confess I don't. Part of it is access to teachers here is easier than I think a lot of other places, so that is a big factor. But as far as like addressing parents, I think we look at it as like, what is going to be something that's topical that a parent can actually engage and manage? Like, what is too much information that leads to inaction and inactivity, and we sort of throw our hands up and say, well, we told them, versus like something that they really want to draw your attention to. So we know we have this relationship with parents already. One of the things I've been asked to look at on the ACT team is what is our quote unquote parent strategy. And I think a lot of it comes back to usability and what's relevant content to them, and not understanding that we have this holistic framework in place that we should be making accessible to parents and have it understandable, and not talk about standard deviations and various sort of means and medians. So I think it's about having a very honest conversation with who we think are actually doing a lot of engagement with us now.
I'm interested to know what parents want to know. Like, my kid isn't in school, and he's still in preschool, and most of the information I get is like, oh yeah, he's doing good. He's not a bad kid. Great, that's great. I want to know those things, but the layer of information that I've seen that technology provides so far to the parents is like, this is the homework that's due, these are the grades your kid got, and it allows parents to, if they want to be more involved in enforcing, making sure, like, you need to get your homework done, and why isn't your grade this? And that's not, for me anyway, that's not the kind of information, I want to know if there's a problem, and I want to be able to help him, but I'm not going to want to just have that daily insight into like how to like manage him better. I want him to learn how to manage himself. And I think what would be more interesting to me is like, here's an article your kid read in school today. Like, maybe you guys want to talk about it, or like, here, I don't know, like more, I would be interested in more insight into what he's doing every day, especially if he's going to be a kid who's not going to tell me what he's doing in school. I don't know yet. So when you ask like how does this technology reach out to the parents? I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what I would want.
Hey, Alec, can I have more time on this? Because you don't know anything about parenting.
I was actually going to push it back at Doug and say,
Well,
you know our stuff.
Okay.
What do you think?
If you're
So
a
yes.
parent, how many times have you asked your kid, what'd you do in school today? What'd you learn in school today? And what are you usually told? Nothing. Of course it's not. The teacher knows what the student learned in school that day, and at most schools, I think the tracking, the curricula, that is online, and it's not, at least at our school, exposed to us. So I would love to know, what did my daughter do at school today? What is she trying to learn over the next month? But yeah, like other than homework assignments, and a teacher meeting if you're really proactive, parent conference meetings twice a year, and report cards, you're a little bit out of the loop unless you go to extraordinary lengths. Another example where I think this would really help schools is you've all seen the memes, a Facebook rant about Common Core math. You know, the parents complaining about it, but then it kind of doubles back on itself, and you also see parents who dug their teeth into it and figured it out and understand sort of the logic to it, or not. You know, I don't know if you have strong feelings either way about Common Core math specifically, that's fine. I think there absolutely are parents who would interact with that technology a lot more and would find it useful. Because you get I sit down to help my daughter do her homework, and she asks the question, why do I have to learn this, or why do I have to do it this way? There's an answer to that question. I don't know what it is. So I can't back the teacher up and be a partner in the process the way I personally would like to.
So I want to just take a second and put a vocab word on what we've been talking about. There's been a lot of sort of social media chatter about this concept of conversation-first design in user experience and user interface type stuff, or social first. And I think a lot of times we roll our eyes and like, well, okay, I'll put the Twitter T at the bottom of the page and we'll call it a day. But I think what they're getting at there is, how do you actually design for the way that humans like to talk? Because you just said, I don't want a deluge of random emails from Canvas about how whatever, or PowerSchool telling me my kid can do quiz 1 but not quiz 2. I don't have time for that, and I don't know what that means. So I wonder if you just would, if any of you feel the need to roll with this idea of conversation first or social first design in ed tech, instead of forcing adults to learn how a computer works, like kind of the other way around.
I think what you see is the world currently reflects the reality for schools, where they are so, they have to be so focused on the metric-driven information and assessment. So that's what they push to parents, scores or progress, quiz 1, quiz 2. It's not a narrative, and it's not sort of qualitative or holistic in the way, you get scores.
I think. Go ahead, Alec.
Well, okay, so I know that Doug is reaching 10 to 15 million people a week through social media and pushing educational content towards them. And it's not necessarily to parents, but I would actually love to, I don't know if I can throw a question back at him, because he threw one at us.
I believe is Doug his alter ego?
Yes.
What's your question?
I would like to know the role you think that social plays in education, and how that concept can be advanced, or is there this kind of ceiling to it, and how that can play a role in this educational process, both for parents, kids, and for professionals in training.
I don't know exactly as far as the relationship between parents and students. That's difficult because they're jumping, one tends to jump ship when the other one figures it out, right? But I think the biggest thing in social is community building, and it goes back to the social, the conversation, and that's what we see. The biggest impact happens when they feel like they are a part of a group of these other learners in the same kind of place in their education, that we see the most powerful messages. But so I don't know. I guess I don't know how the parent and student would interact in that place. I don't have a great answer for you.
What about how parents would interact with one another? As parents, we have a Facebook group for all the 6th grade parents, but it's primarily like an organizing social activity sort of function. Parents have common cause in trying to help their kids achieve academically, but I've yet to see a really good forum for parents to collaborate in their same age students' learning. I don't have a forum right now specifically for discussing what our kids are learning in math right now in 6th grade and how we can help one another. And I think there's an idea there.
I think part of the challenge, and I've seen this with my startup life, and I've seen it in ACT as well, is a lot of the solutions that are built are, the parent is maybe a secondary, really usually a tertiary role in the purchasing decision. It's being sold to B2B enterprises, and they're typically looking at much different issues. They're not looking at that narrative with the student per se, where a teacher may be looking at that interaction point. What's this actually going to, how am I going to be empowered to teach? And much less parents, like, what do I need to do? that's not what they're really typically looking for. I'm not trying to say it's not a consideration, but they are looking at reporting metrics. So I think a lot of times what you see is how, I have a spreadsheet of data points. How do I put that into an email, into a blast email schedule to parents? And it's checked off the box. Like, we want it to be social, so therefore we have the Twitter plugin. So I think a lot of it is the model of channel and acquisition. It's not typically built for a parent. There are solutions that are being built for parents. And again, Startup Life had done a fair amount of customer discovery on this. And as a parent, and Michael has talked about this as well, it's like how much you really want and need to know. And they tend to be very specific, very, very focused on one thing. So I just think it's worth sort of thinking that the model typically for a lot of the solutions that we kind of deal with right now in the market, the parents are sort of a tertiary person in that funnel.
And so is the student, and I think that can be a problem. Talking with, actually, I guess I don't want to be too specific. Talking with some others in the space, I think that they only really care because it's so top down. And the way we've come at it is actually making it so it's more bottom up, so the students actually get to pick the thing. And that makes it more survival of the fittest, and the best thing wins out. Whereas when it's top down, it's which has the longest relationship with that, and they don't want to mess with it. And so it becomes the best tools aren't always available. And I've literally heard people say, like, well, we don't care if the student likes it or what they think or if it's the best way for them to learn. The administrators like it when we do it like this best, so we're going to do it like this.
Right.
And it's like, what? Like, it's supposed to be for the student. So there's a very infuriating thing to hear, and I think it plays in that same direction. It's just the top-down nature of it that makes it not survival of the fittest in terms of the best thing wins out.
Awesome. We are actually running out of time. We got time for one more question.
Hey, thanks. My question is really based on sort of there are certain social justice aspects of education in the United States that already exist, and it seems to me that the addition of technology potentially puts another barrier up against the people of lower income or lower access. So what, if any, role do you see for tech companies who are infiltrating and working with education to address these social justice issues of access?
I'll go. I'll fire away. So part of ACT's mission is a public trust company, and we have Jim Larimore is I'm actually Jim's title is Senior VP for Underserved Learners, and we have a whole host of people in that group. Typically, it's low, just on a general level, it's low socioeconomic status that typically disadvantages them. And one of the things, sort of having this conversation, these are live conversations at ACT. We don't have like the perfect solution by any means. Is looking at how does mobile play into this? Because part of it is finding solutions that aren't very effective and aren't very good. And so we think we have some of the best. Now, how do we reach these audiences and how do we work with them? Typically, it's going to be done through a partnership. If it's going to be through a mobile device, that presents its own challenges because 18 to 19% of the population of North America is either completely dependent upon or very dependent upon their mobile device, which of course now bumps up against all sorts of mechanical issues and financial issues of load times and data loads that push up the money they have to pay. And there's a story we have in I can't remember, it's Southern Texas, some really poor district where students are standing outside the school building at night because that's their only way to access Wi-Fi to get their homework done. That's these insane things. So for us, it's looking at how do we use our tools, our sort of value to empower partnerships to reach these disadvantaged communities. And I think everyone's kind of looking at some of this stuff, but you're right. I think in many respects, technology has, I think Adam may have made this point, has not solved it or maybe even increased the gap in some respect. And I think we should be honest about that.
I'm dubious. I see technology having the ability to raise the bar, but the gap between rich and poor above the bar stays the same or even widens. And sometimes there's rhetoric that's not helpful. ACT's competitor, the College Board, has this partnership with Khan Academy, which they've gotten a lot of mileage and saying, oh, this is going to be the game changer and this is going to fix, close this gap, and it hasn't. And I think we're not honest enough about that. We're not committed enough to making sure that the basic technology is not there yet. Those of us who work in assessment, if you had told us 10, 15 years ago that in 2016 the SAT and ACT are still not going to be predominantly computer-based tests, we would have been shocked. Why has that not happened yet? You guys piloted online ACT prep pretty aggressively a few years ago in West Virginia or
I think so.
Kentucky. We're not there yet, and I don't know that we're committed enough to ever getting there. Boy, that's a downer. And on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I have a lot of things I could say. The ways that we try to make, at Paradeck, we try to make our technology as accessible as possible by making it work on any kind of device, and we work on a platform, Google, that's free. We try to do these kinds of things, but I don't, as Adam's sort of saying, I don't want to try to pretend that is like fixing it. Like we've done it. We've made it accessible to everyone, whatever kind of device they have. So I think there's a responsibility there, but I think it's huge and beyond.
I think, well, the things that are the most cutting edge and successful will continue to be available first and in greatest quantity to, the most privileged members of our society. Look at healthcare, latest and greatest and best. So that's why I say, I think what's a realistic hope is that technology and education continues to increase the bar from the low end, but the gap being narrowed, I'm not optimistic.
I think I feel differently than
Good.
some others. And I think it was a great question also. One of the things that really spurred us going all in and creating this organization, because we knew it needed to be there for dental to help them study. That was very obvious to me. But I was actually in Africa, in the Kibera slums in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya, and they did not have running water, and they had smartphones in 2012. And to me, it just blew my mind. And it's like, wow, because they're not getting radios, they're not getting TVs, they don't have a computer, but they were getting smartphones. And when I saw that, it made me really realize, this is something that's not just dentistry. This is something that can be a game changer. If we can put solid educational materials, it can open up the access for that. And looking at my own experience as an entrepreneur, I've been able to learn from some of the best people in Silicon Valley and in other areas because of that opening up of information. So I think it really levels the playing field. I don't think it's where it needs to be, but I think there's huge potential. And I know as an organization, we want to drive that potential. And I think there's other people who are doing that as well. So I feel optimistic. I do think it'll have to be a revolution of sorts. It's not going to be able to be incremental on top, but for now it has to be, and I think it's building towards something that can be really big in education with all of these tools that are out there and really help solve some of those problems, because education, I think, is the biggest way to solve those social issues, is to educate people and make them have the skills to solve their own problems rather than trying to solve it for them.
I really can't think of a better way to punctuate a discussion on ed tech than that point. Thank you.